All right. Hey, everyone, and welcome to another deep dive with us.
Yes, welcome back.
And this time we are tackling something that I think is often overlooked when it comes to being a real-life superhero.
Yeah, what's that?
It's not the flashy gadgets.
Okay.
It's not the super strength or the ability to fly. It's
What is it?
conflict resolution.
Ah, yes. The art of talking someone down from a ledge or maybe even out of a bad situation.
Exactly. And I've got to admit, this is something I've had to learn the hard way.
Oh, I bet you have some stories.
More than a few. Let's just say my attempts at mediating a noise complaint with a beatboxing battle didn't exactly go as planned.
Well, that's why we've brought in the expert today to help us all level up our conflict resolution skills.
Yeah, we're diving deep into tactics from folks who deal with this stuff every day. Law enforcement, EMS, even hostage negotiators.
Because sometimes out there in the field, it feels like we're dealing with hostages of their own emotions.
Ain't that the truth? Okay, so let's get started. We've got this stack of articles and manuals, and the first one, this article from ADR Times. It really emphasizes this idea that resolving conflict is all about moving forward.
That's a great point. It's not about winning or losing an argument.
Right. It's about finding a solution that lets everyone walk away feeling heard and hopefully a little bit calmer.
Absolutely. And a big part of that is active listening and asking the right questions.
Oh, yeah. The folks at 211 LA and Diffuse, they've got some really interesting tips on this.
They talk about using open-ended questions.
And non-judgmental language.
Right. So instead of yelling, "Why are you so angry?" at someone who's already on edge,
Which, let's be honest, is tempting sometimes.
you could try a gentler approach like, "Hey, this sounds really frustrating. What happened?"
Okay, that makes sense. It's like you're acknowledging their feelings without adding fuel to the fire.
Exactly. You're inviting them to explain their perspective, which can often de-escalate things right off the bat.
It's so true. Just letting someone vent can work wonders.
Hmm.
I remember that time I found those teenagers spray painting the community center wall.
Oh, boy.
My first instinct was to go all Captain Obvious on them and yell, "Hey, vandalism is wrong."
Did they suddenly see the error of their ways?
Not quite. They just rolled their eyes and told me to mind my own business.
Teenagers.
But then I tried something different. I took a deep breath. I mean, remember deep breaths? Those are like our real superpowers.
Absolutely.
And I said, "Hey, I see you're expressing yourselves through art, but maybe we could find a better canvas than the community center wall. I hear they're looking for volunteers to paint murals down by the skate park."
Now that's clever.
And guess what? Those teenagers are now responsible for some of the coolest street art in town.
See, redirection, sometimes it's way more effective than confrontation.
It's all about channeling that energy in a positive direction.
That's a perfect example of how empathy and a little bit of creativity can go a long way. It also highlights what the Diffuse article says about body language and active listening,
Oh yeah, those are key.
especially for us RLSH. We don't have the authority of a police officer.
Right. We rely even more on building trust and rapport to de-escalate a situation. So basically no power posing or dramatic cape flourishes when you're trying to calm someone down.
Probably best to save those for the photo ops.
Yeah.
Think about it.
Okay.
If you approach someone with your arms crossed, a scowl on your face, and a voice like thunder, are they going to feel at ease?
Definitely not even. I wouldn't trust a superhero who looked like they were about to audition for a Batman movie.
Exactly. Relaxed posture, open hands, genuine curiosity. Those are your secret weapons.
Like disarming them with kindness.
Now let's add another layer to this. The ADR Times article also brings up this concept of picking your battles using a 1-10 scale.
Oh, I love a good scale. So are we talking like a 1 is a heated debate about pineapple on pizza,
Okay.
and a 10 is a full-blown supervillain bank heist?
Exactly. But seriously, this scale can be really useful for RLSH.
I see it.
You need to ask yourself, how important is it for me to intervene directly in this situation? Is this a 3 where I can maybe mediate, or a 7 where calling for backup is the smarter move?
Ah, so it's about knowing your limits.
Exactly. Which, speaking of that, reminds me of that time you tried to stop a purse snatcher.
Oh, no, don't remind me.
And you ended up tripping over your own cape and landing face first in a puddle.
It was not my finest hour.
Not exactly textbook superheroism.
Luckily, a real police officer was nearby and caught the guy. But that's when I learned a valuable lesson. Knowing when to call for backup is just as important as knowing how to throw a punch.
Couldn't agree more, and that actually ties in perfectly with this Lexipol article we have here. It talks about the importance of understanding legal boundaries.
Oh, yeah, that's something we RLSH need to be extra careful about. We're not deputized crime
It's
fighters.
a fine line we walk.
We need to know when a situation truly requires calling in the professionals like police or EMTs.
We're not trained for everything, and we shouldn't put ourselves or others in danger by trying to play hero when we're out of our depth.
Right? Safety first, always. Okay, so we've got active listening, empathetic language, picking our battles, and knowing our limits. It's starting to sound like a real-life superhero training manual.
And remember, it's all about adapting these skills to the unique situations we face as RLSH.
Right, dealing with agitated individuals during homeless outreach, diffusing potential conflicts on patrol.
It's a whole different skill set than fighting supervillains.
Okay, so let's talk about those tricky situations. Say you're on patrol, and you encounter someone who's clearly having a mental health crisis.
Right.
They're agitated, disoriented, maybe talking to themselves.
This is a tough one.
How do you even begin to approach a situation like that?
Well, all those articles from Axon, EMS1, and Police 1, they stress the importance of empathy and avoiding judgment.
Right, because we can't just yell, calm down, or what's wrong with you, at someone who's struggling.
Those phrases are dismissive and unhelpful and likely to make things worse.
Yeah, so what do you say?
Instead, approach them calmly and use validating language like, hey, I can see you're having a tough time. What's going on? How can I help?
Okay, so it's about recognizing that their behavior is a symptom of their condition, not a personal attack.
And sometimes the most heroic thing you can do is simply be present.
Yeah,
Listen without judgment and offer support while waiting for professional help to arrive.
that's a good reminder. Sometimes just being a calming presence is enough.
Well said. I think it's time to move on to our next section where we'll unpack some real-world scenarios and see how these techniques play out in the field.
Let's do it.
Welcome back to the deep dive.
All right, so we've got the theory down, active listening, empathetic language, picking our battles, knowing our limits.
But how does that actually play out in the field?
Yeah, because theory's great, but when you're facing a real situation, those superpowers better work.
Okay, so let's put those skills to the test with a few scenarios. Imagine this. You're on patrol and you spot a group of teenagers tagging a local park with some, let's call it unauthorized artwork. What's your
Yeah.
first move?
All right, red flags. Teenagers got public property, possible disrespect for local ordinances. Definitely not a situation I want to escalate into a supervillain origin story.
Exactly. Remember that 1-10 scale?
Oh, yeah.
Is this a situation that needs immediate intervention, or could you observe from a distance, gather some information, and maybe call for backup?
Okay, so is this a lecture them about civic duty scenario or a call the authorities scenario?
It's all about assessment.
Yeah, I mean, these aren't hardened criminals. They're probably just bored and expressing themselves poorly.
Exactly. So observing and assessing, that's a good first step while you're doing that. Think about your goals. What outcome are you hoping for?
Okay, let's see. Ideally, the tagging stops.
Yeah.
But I also don't want to alienate these kids or make them feel like I'm the enemy, because if there's one thing I've learned from comic books, it's that teenagers with angst and spray paint can sometimes take a turn toward the dark side.
You're getting it. Empathy and non-judgmental communication are key.
Okay, so let's say I decide to approach them. What's the best way to make contact without scaring them off or triggering a fight or flight response?
Remember superhero body language? Relaxed posture, open hands, approach calmly. No swooping in from the rooftops or using your most intimidating voice.
Got it. No booming pronouncements of justice this time.
And instead of starting with accusations, hey, you punks, what do you think you're doing? Try something more approachable, like, hey, guys, what's going on here?
Ah, so I'm acknowledging their presence and expressing a willingness to understand rather than jumping straight into crime and punishment mode?
Right, and then active listening is crucial. Let them explain themselves, even if their reasoning is, we were bored.
Because even we were bored is probably masking something deeper, right? Maybe they feel like nobody listens to them. Maybe there's not enough for teens to do in this town. It could be a sign of a larger community issue.
Exactly. So once you've heard them out, you can use those open-ended questions. Instead of lecturing them about respecting property, try something like, it sounds like you're frustrated. What would it take to find a more positive way to channel that energy?
Ooh, that's good. It's like I'm challenging them to come up with a solution rather than just telling them what they did wrong.
And you're subtly reminding them they have the power to make better choices.
Okay, so that's vandalism. Now, let's say the situation is a bit more serious. I'm on patrol and I see a domestic dispute happening. A couple arguing loudly, things are getting heated. This isn't teenage angst anymore. This feels dangerous.
This is where things get even trickier and where remembering that Lexapol article about knowing your limits is so important. A domestic dispute is complex and intervening could be risky.
Right, I'm not a trained mediator, and even though my costume has a cool cape, I'm not a police officer.
Exactly. Your first priority is always safety, yours and theirs. Observe from a distance, assess the situation, and call for backup immediately.
Because even if I had the world's best de-escalation skills, this isn't something I should handle alone.
Absolutely. While you're waiting for the professionals to arrive, you can still use those active listening skills to gather information. What are they arguing about? Is there any indication of physical violence? Are there children present? All of this is valuable information to relay to the police.
Okay, so even if I can't solve the problem, information gathering is still helpful.
Now let's shift gears. Again, you're doing homeless outreach and you encounter someone who's clearly having a mental health crisis. They're agitated, disoriented, possibly talking to themselves. How do you approach the situation?
Okay, this is where those articles from Axon, EMS1, and Police 1 really come into play first and foremost. I have to remember, this person is not in their right mind. They're not intentionally trying to be difficult or scary.
Their behavior is a symptom of their condition.
So no yelling, calm down, or
Right.
what's wrong with you? Got it.
Exactly. Those phrases are judgmental and dismissive, and they're likely to escalate the situation. Instead, approach them with a calm, gentle demeanor and use empathetic language like, hey, I can see you're having a tough time. Is there anything I can do to help?
Okay, so even though my instinct is to fix things, my goal here is really just to de-escalate and make them feel a little safer.
Right. You're not a mental health professional, so your job isn't to diagnose or treat. Sometimes the most heroic act is simply listening without judgment and offering support while waiting for professional help to arrive.
That makes sense sometimes. Just being a calming presence is enough.
But what happens if the situation escalates? What if they become a danger to themselves or others?
Well, that's where knowing my limits comes back in as much as I want to help. I'm not equipped to handle a full-blown mental health crisis. If things start to get out of control, I need to disengage and call for professional help.
And remember, your own safety is always paramount.
Thinking back to that Vantage Point article, it's a good reminder that de-escalation is a process, not an instant fix. Sometimes success isn't about achieving an immediate solution. It's about managing the situation, containing the crisis, and preventing things from getting worse.
Sometimes the best you can do is create a safe space, offer support, and wait for the professionals.
Okay, we've covered a lot of scenarios here. Vandalism, domestic disputes, mental health crises.
It really shows the range of situations RLSH encounter and why these de-escalation techniques are so crucial.
All right, so let's do a quick recap of those key takeaways before we move on to our final segment. Active listening, empathetic language, picking your battles, knowing your limits, prioritizing safety, and practicing self-care.
Those are the foundations for effective conflict resolution for RLSH.
Now on to our final segment, where we'll explore. Welcome back, heroes. It's the final round of our deep dive into conflict resolution, and this time we're going beyond specific tactics. We're talking mindset.
Ah, the mental game.
Exactly. It's about being the kind of RLSH who can diffuse a situation faster than you can say, holy de-escalation Batman.
And it goes back to that idea from the ADR Times article, moving forward.
Right. Remember, conflict isn't a battle to be won or lost. It's an opportunity to move forward in a way that benefits everyone.
Exactly. A conflict resolution mindset is about finding solutions, not assigning blame. It's about understanding that conflict is going to happen, especially when we're out there dealing with all sorts of people.
Oh, it's so true. I used to see conflict as like a personal failure, like I wasn't doing my superhero job, right?
I get it.
But then I realized even Superman has to deal with disagreements. I mean, Lois Lane, she's pretty feisty.
She is. And when you approach conflict with the right mindset, the whole dynamic changes.
Okay, how so?
Instead of getting defensive or trying to win the argument, you can stay calm. Listen with empathy. Respond thoughtfully.
It's like instead of going into fight mode, you're activating your diplomacy superpowers.
I love that analogy.
You're not trying to overpower the situation. You're trying to understand it and guide it towards a peaceful resolution.
And that sense of calm, that centeredness, it's what allows you to de-escalate, effectively build rapport, maybe even find some common ground.
So you're saying even supervillains can have a point?
Well, I'm not saying you should agree with their world domination plans.
Okay, good, because that's where I draw the line.
But sometimes understanding their motivation can help you find a way to de-escalate the situation.
It's like that time I stopped a robbery at a convenience store. Turned out the guy was desperate and stealing diapers for his baby.
Wow, that's a tough one.
But my initial reaction was to go full-on superhero.
Yeah.
But something about his demeanor just felt off. I talked to him, found out what was going on, and ended up helping him get resources instead of arresting him.
Sometimes understanding the root of the conflict changes everything.
It really does. And it all comes back to managing our own emotions. Remember that Reddit thread we talked about, staying calm under pressure?
Oh yeah, all those techniques.
Wow.
Deep breaths, focusing on the facts, not taking things personally.
Those are crucial for RLSH, too.
Absolutely. If we're freaking out, we're not going to be much help to anyone. It's like trying to teach a puppy to sit while juggling chainsaws.
Not a good combination.
Cultivating that inner calm, that resilience, it's essential for any RLSH who wants to master conflict resolution.
And that's where self-care comes in, right? Making sure we're taking care of our own mental and emotional well-being.
Exactly. You can't pour from an empty cup. Self-care is about making sure you have the energy and resilience to show up for others when they need you most.
So meditation, exercise, spending time with loved ones, maybe even a little therapy. These aren't just indulgences. They're essential maintenance for our superhero toolkit.
Couldn't agree more.
Okay, so we've got the mindset, the techniques, the self-care routine. This is like the ultimate guide to conflict resolution for real-life superheroes.
And remember, it's not just about preventing things from getting worse when you successfully de-escalate a situation. It has a ripple effect.
Yeah.
You're modeling that behavior for others, showing them there's a better way to handle disagreements.
It's like we're planting seeds of peace, one interaction at a time.
Exactly. And those seeds can grow into a more harmonious, more resilient community. So the next time you're facing a conflict, remember, you're not just a superhero. You're a peacemaker. Your greatest power isn't your costume or your gadgets. It's your ability to connect, understand, and find common ground.
Well said. That wraps up our deep dive into conflict resolution. Fellow heroes, remember, stay safe, stay heroic, and never underestimate the power of peaceful solutions. And hey, if you ever find yourself in a tricky situation, take a deep breath, channel your inner peacemaker, and ask yourself, what would a truly superhero do?
Until next time, keep fighting the good fight, and remember, peace is a superpower.
And that's a wrap on the deep dive.